I never play a bad guy as a bad guy. I always try to play a bad guy as a good guy. Now, because of the context and the information that you get in the script, he'll end up being perceived as a bad guy. But really, I approach him and try to figure out in the real work of acting, which is before you're on camera, try to find ways of understanding his way of thinking and justifying it. And in most cases, a lot of it has to do with a kind of a wounded arrogance, in a sense. People who think they're better than other people, but have been hurt, and so they pull away, and they do things that are destructive to kind of try to manipulate people and stuff. But also, when I play a good guy, for the most part, I try to study him, at least partially, as a bad guy. Because we all have those both sides and everything in between. So I try to make the good guys a little bit more interesting by giving them sort of some texture. So I was truly just trying to be the best possible snake.
You succeeded. Wow.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, too, and I mean, in Hollywood, it's almost a cliche that the nicest guys are the bad guys. That the people who are decent human beings, not that I'm all that great, but I'm okay, in real life, in many cases, are the most horrifying bad guys. Because you don't have the expectation of them being bad. So it's very unnerving. I did a Profiler a couple of years ago, and I really liked I was really proud of that performance. I mean, not because of anything I did, actually because the director was wise enough to keep coming up to me after every take and to say, Edward, less. Less, take 20% off it. And he kept doing that and doing it until I felt I was doing nothing, which was right. And I mean, it was a kind of a Hannibal Lecter-ish character.
Yeah.
And there were like 3 or 4 scenes with Ali, and I'm always sitting there behind bars, kind of, you know, in a holding cell. And basically what the director and I tried to do was to get the characterization as un-bad guy as possible. And now that's really harrowing. When you start to kind of sympathize and empathize with this person on screen, and you can understand, and you think, well, he's actually sort of, you know, charming, and there's a kind of, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, this guy drove a school bus of kids into a hole and buried them. No, that was the Walker, Texas Ranger. But you get the idea. You know, I mean, I'm mixing and matching my shows here. But essentially, that's it. Is you try to engage the audience's empathy as a bad guy, so they forget you're a bad guy, and then the script or the context of the story suddenly reminds you that they're a bad guy, and now you've got them leaning. Yeah.
When you do a show like Nash Bridges or Walker, Texas Rangers, do you still have to audition, or do they call your agent and go, we need Eddie Albert Tide to see available?
Yeah, right. Get me a younger Eddie Albert. I actually should memorize it, but there's a wonderful thing, and it happened to Jack Lemmon, and it was his line of, you know, it starts, get me Jack Lemmon, and then the next thing is get me a Jack Lemmon type, and then get me a cheaper Jack Lemmon type, then get me a younger, cheaper Jack Lemmon type, and eventually it goes back to get me Jack Lemmon. Yeah, you know, and it's an amazing thing, but the business, in certainly the span of time that I've been part of it, has changed so incredibly, and my dad even more so. I mean, he was telling me the other day about the story about something that happened when there were only 50 TV sets in America, and they were all in New Jersey. You know, I think 50 TV, please. Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting process for an actor. And I'm lucky in a sense because it was sort of like part of the family business. My dad had been a shoemaker, I'd be making boots, is a phrase I use fairly frequently, so not frequently, but too often probably. And that's really true. So in a sense, for me, I'm in it for a different reason. I got into it for a different reason than most. It is very, very true that it's a difficult art form, in the sense that if you're a painter and you do a canvas and you take it to the gallery guy and you say, and the guy goes, well, it's okay, go paint another canvas. If you're a writer, you write a short story or a book, you take the manuscript to a publisher, he reads it and he goes, well, yes, wonderful, but not what we want, you know. And they're saying, and so you go write something else. But as an actor, you are the violin, you are the music, you are the canvas, you are the manuscript. And when they say no, they're saying no to you, the person. And boy, it took, even if for me, it even took me literally a couple of decades to really get to the point where it doesn't bother me at all anymore. I don't even think about it for the most part. I think of auditions really as a chance to do a scene, because I don't study acting or go to classes or anything like that. So really, it's an opportunity for me to take a scene, work on it, try to do the best job I can, and go in and do it for some folks. And that's my goal, not to so much usually even to get the job, but to go in and to be able to kind of try to do a good audition for me in terms of my art and my performance. Basically what my mom taught me early on is that we have a spirit within us, and everything we do is a sacred expression of that. Whether it's sweeping the floor, or painting a picture, or, acting a scene or whatever. But in answer to your question, yeah, I still audition for 99.9% of everything I do. And boy, it sort of gets a little old. It really does, And I mean, you walk down a hallway with all these actors trying not to look at each other in the eye, going over there, mumbling their scenes, and you can cut the fear with a knife. I mean, I really sort of do feel sorry for a lot of these guys, because it's a very, very difficult profession. It is literally constant projection, and even the success in many ways is more difficult and more dangerous than failure. And the road of history is littered with the bodies of people who suddenly had a huge success and not survived it. You go on a set every day and everybody laughs at your jokes and nobody tells you when you're stepping over the line, because their job. I mean, if you get pissed at them, all of a sudden they're gone. And people try to translate that into real life, and it don't translate. Because other folks aren't quite so beholden, and you get sort of arrogant and demanding with real people in real life in real time, and you're likely to get whooped upside the head. But it's a process. It's a process that's sort of difficult but interesting if you approach it the right way.
I forget. How did you get the part of Kelly in Beauty Beast? Did you audition?
Yeah, actually, it was very interesting. There was if it weren't for a casting lady named Joyce Robinson, I wouldn't have done it. It's a good question. One of the things, and this has to do with your question too about auditioning. One of the traps that I do fall into occasionally is I'll do a different performance for the audition than I will in the eventual shooting of that scene. Because I'm doing it in some cases under different circumstances for different reasons. I'm reading and a lot of the time you're reading with a casting director who's going, oh dear, look over there, we said that, and then you've got to sort of come up with something that's natural and has energy and whatever. And so, in this case, what I did, and Elliot Birch was originally a villain. No two ways about it, a villain. And it was only because of Kaz that he sort of evolved, and me, that he kind of evolved into a more interesting, almost a good guy, And at the very end, the last scene that I remember shooting with Ron, after all that time, we finally got a scene together. And I had set him up to be shot with a sniper, and I at the last second, we're talking to each other, and I suddenly decided I can't do this. And I took the bullet. And that was the setup for me being taken down underground, and he was going to nurse me, back to health. And we were going to become friends, and I was sort of sad to see it end there, because I was finally going to, go subterranean. But what happened was that I went in and I did the reading as a villain, and this is also connects to your question. And it was too much. It was corny. It was hammy, And so thank you very much, and I leave. And I was downstairs, and I stopped to call Kate to just tell her that I'd done the audition. It went okay, and I was on my way home. And I picked up something on the way. And I'm sitting there on the phone, and Joyce Robinson comes running down. She said, Edward, so glad I caught you. And she was like 3 flights of stairs, and she really, extended herself. Sweet person. And said, Edward, listen, you know what, that it wasn't right. It didn't work. Come back and don't play him as a villain, or as much, or as evil, or I can't remember exactly, but that's essentially what she said. And I went, oh, okay. So I went back and I just relaxed and didn't try to do anything, which is usually when you're the most effective. And just let it kind of flow out, because I already had done it once, and chewed scenery, as we say.